Not nearly as much movement in the running back market on free agency this year as much as we had last year, but nonetheless, we still have some movement and some guys signing long-term extensions. So we're going through the top 30 running backs for 2025 initially. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. So getting into our first tier, I've got Saquon Barkley at 1 and Jahmyr Gibbs at 2. So with Saquon Barkley, obviously coming off that massive season that he had last year, the only thing I'll caution with this one is how hard it is to repeat what he just did. I don't think anybody assumes he's going to repeat the production that he just had. But the thing is that running backs and wide receivers, what we have found and what I'll continue to go over in a different video is that wide receivers and running backs typically split year to year on who has the better majority of fantasy points and who ends up dominating in fantasy football. Last year was the running back year. History would say wide receivers do better this year. So if Saquon can sustain like 80 to 85% of that production, he could still be the number one. And I just think his situation is still too good to underestimate. Jahmyr Gibbs at number 2. Also, Jahmyr Gibbs, I think there's actually going to be some benefit here with certain guys in the Detroit Lions building offensively without Ben Johnson. Not to say that Ben Johnson isn't a great OC. We all know that Ben Johnson is fantastic as an offensive coordinator. But the one thing that Ben Johnson did that most offensive coordinators just can't do to that level is maximize every single freaking player on his offense. And they've got tons of weapons, right? I think that this next offensive coordinator will not be as good and will basically just be able to maximize the best of the best, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown's, Jahmyr Gibbs. I think David Montgomery, Jameson Williams might suffer in this offense, but it should be good for fantasy superstardom for a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. Bijan Robinson at 3 and Devon Achane at 4 to round out this tier. Now, I think with this first tier right here, I just kind of really like all 4 of these guys so much. And again, I think that it's kind of a wide open ball game as far as I'm concerned because I like all their situations, really not as equally as maybe Saquon and Jahmyr Gibbs. But Bijan Robinson, for example, coming into his 3rd year, he's already been really good to start out his career. And that's been behind like a good offensive line, but a really dysfunctional offense when you actually put everything together. This offense has not been a fantastic offense by any means. Kirk Cousins really fell apart last year, and Bijan Robinson is going to get still a bunch of targets because Michael Penix, while more mobile than Kirk Cousins is, because that's hard to do, he's definitely not the most mobile guy as far as like a Jaden Daniels, where he's going to take off and run and not really dump the ball down a ton. There will be dump offs for Bijan, and I think overall, just with Michael Penix there, Bijan should be more efficient in his 3rd year. And then with Devon Achane here, I think the Dolphins' offense is getting worse, but I don't think it's because Devon Achane stinks. We know Devon Achane is the real deal. Like, he's the real deal, and I think as far as right now is concerned, he's kind of their central point. Because Tyreek Hill may or may not be there, and even if he is there, the guy is declining. Jalen Waddle at this point, we can't really rely on him to be their number 1 weapon on offense because he's just too inconsistent. Devon Achane is going to get tons of targets. He's going to get plenty of efficiency moving the ball. Jalen Wright might have some contribution to this offense, help take some pressure off Achane. Either way, I think Achane is set up for another really, really good year heading into the year 3 as well. Dropping out to our next tier, I've got Josh Jacobs at 5. And yeah, Ashton Jeanty at number 6. Don't even know the landing spot. We'll get into him in a minute. Josh Jacobs at number 5. I think Green Bay is the perfect spot for Josh Jacobs to have another good year. Josh Jacobs, yes, is getting older. I don't particularly love the age that he's at. But just based on what he did last year, the thing is, what's funny is that if they used him as they did in the last 8 to 10 games, for the entirety of the season, the guy would have been a top 3, top 4 running back. Like, he was on pace those last, 10 or 8 games to be a top 3 guy. He was fantastic. He was the workhorse. They had tons of injuries to that offense, specifically with the running backs and the wide receivers at the end. Josh Jacobs just kind of had to carry the workload. I think this year, maybe they go into it a little bit differently and just assume that he is the lead back, and he should be getting tons of work because he does better the more volume he gets. He's a volume guy. Josh Jacobs can handle it. I think he'll be great this year. Ashton Jeanty at 6. We don't know where this guy's going. If you don't know this guy, do some more research out of what I just tell you. Out of Boise State, probably the best running back prospect since Bijan Robinson. I think possibly even better. Ashton Jeanty is phenomenal. He had a Barry Sanders level season in 2024 for Boise State. He led them to the playoff run that they had. he's going to be an incredible workhorse wherever he goes. The only concern is that he's small. He's undersized, I guess, compared to a Derrick Henry, a Josh Jacobs type, someone like a Bijan Robinson. But he's very similar to Devon Achan's height, right? But he weighs more than Devon Achane. He's bigger than Jahmyr Gibbs. The guy is going to be incredible. It doesn't matter. He's got the skill set. He's going to be awesome. So I don't really care if he goes to the Raiders, if he goes to the Bears. I don't care. He's going to work somewhere. Kyren Williams at number 7 to round out this tier. I think Kyren Williams is set up for a very similar type of season unless they draft somebody. Blake Corum is not the guy, right? Like, everybody thought Blake Corum was going to come in, be able to split, maybe even lead the backfield last year. Imagine how funny it is looking back on that. Not even a year later, the guy did nothing in his rookie year, and he won't do it in his second year. Kyren Williams is the lead back until anyone says otherwise. The guy is going to be their lead back unless they draft somebody, because they're not signing anybody on free agency. So I think as far as I care, the guy is still young enough to where we can expect another good, efficient season from him. I expect Kyren Williams to be top 10 again this year unless they draft somebody. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Derrick Henry at 8 and Christian McCaffrey at 9. Our two old guys right here. It's really hard to tell. Particularly with Derrick Henry, I feel like this is like the Mike Evans version at running back, right? To where I feel like Derrick Henry could either have another really strong season, or this could be the year that he falls off a cliff, and anybody who has him in fantasy is going to really suffer, because he's going to be a high round pick still. Derrick Henry right now on Underdog is still a top 3 round pick. And that's the concern that I have here, is that if he was like a 6th or 7th rounder, I wouldn't have nearly the concerns that I have with him. But since he is going so high on a platform that can win you $250,000+ on one of these particular drafts right now, I don't feel as comfortable picking Derrick Henry. I still like the situation offensively. Their offensive line is still really good. Derrick Henry didn't show signs of slowing down last year, but he's at that age to where it absolutely can happen at any point. I'm going to put him at 8 here for now. And same with McCaffrey. McCaffrey is younger than Derrick Henry. That's the positive that he has on his side. The negative he's got on his side, he's so much more injured than Derrick Henry has been. Christian McCaffrey has dealt with tons of injuries, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years. So Christian McCaffrey, as far as I'm concerned, again, this could very easily be the time where he falls off a cliff too. And let's just assume that he stays healthy. How good will he really be? This is kind of where I'm predicting. Number 9 overall. He'll have really strong games, but I think he'll have inefficient games as well. Just because he's at that age and he's been banged up so much, I don't think we're going to see any more of Christian McCaffrey dominance sustained over a season as we have had, the past couple of years. Breece Hall at 10, James Cook at 11. Breece Hall is in a make or break year. In a lot of ways, Breece Hall coming into a contract year, right? So he should be plenty motivated to get the biggest bag money that he can get, right? So Breece Hall, I don't consider the effort that we're going to see a negative. I don't really get concerned about that. Where I get concerned about Breece Hall is that Justin Fields is the quarterback now. So what that's going to do is it's going to significantly cut the amount of workload he will see through the air. They will have to design reception work for Breece Hall to get him 3 targets a game, let alone 5 targets a game. Now, the good thing is that typically brings with rushing quarterbacks more efficiency on the ground. So as long as Breece Hall can handle a healthy workload, I believe he'll be efficient. I believe he'll get in the end zone more than he did last year. So those are 2 positives that I think are kind of evening out the amount of workload that he will lose through the air. And I think that's why I've got him at 10. And then James Cook at 11, I think he kind of is what he is. And that's not in a negative way. He's a top 12 back. James Cook is also coming up on a contract year. So he should be really, really motivated this year. James Cook is also the most important piece by far outside of Josh Allen on the Buffalo Bills. They're not going to discontinue using him in his contract year when he's fighting for a contract. Now, he's a little bit older at his, at the end of his rookie contract, but I just don't, it doesn't matter because we just haven't seen a drop-off from James Cook. So I'm not worried. I think he'll still continue to get tons of reception work. He'll be really efficient on the ground. James Cook is still here inside the top 12. And rounding out the top 12, Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving at number 12, I feel really, really good about. The thing with Bucky Irving is that I was saying all last year that Bucky Irving should have been the lead back from the very, from basically the end of September on. It was very clear that if you were watching the Buccaneers, that was the better running back between him and Rachaad White. Now, they caught on to it. He ended up having a good end to the season in fantasy football. And I think he goes into the year as their main guy. He showed too much on the ground and through the reception game. I think he's going to continue to be really efficient this year. They've still got a good offensive line. They've still got offensive pieces around him. He's not going to have to carry the workload, but he will be a very good James Cook type of piece for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2025. If you are just itching to draft right now, kind of like I am at this point in the offseason, go to Underdog. All you got to do on Underdog is go to one of their NFL best ball drafts. The biggest one for return is the $10 buy-in. So basically, you just deposit $10. You get in on one of those drafts. It's 20 rounds. It's best ball, so that doesn't mean you have to set your lineup every week. Every week, your lineup is automatically scored by position at the best scores by position, and then you have the chance to win $250,000, my friend. I won $19,000 on Underdog in 2024, and that's because I made the finals in 3 different tournaments. So if you want to give yourself a chance at big money on Underdog, go down in the comments and grab the link that's there and use code FFN to sign up for Underdog. They will match that first deposit 50% up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you take advantage of code FFN. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Jonathan Taylor at 13 and Kenneth Walker at 14. So with JT, I think it's kind of going to be a really interesting year for Jonathan Taylor, to be honest with you, because Jonathan Taylor had a great end to 2024. And that was without Anthony Richardson as that main quarterback. And I think that when you look at what Jonathan Taylor did with Anthony Richardson, he was just really up or down with Anthony Richardson and even with Joe Flacco. Now, the problem that Jonathan Taylor is going to have is obviously it looks like all accounts that he will be the quarterback this year. Daniel Jones is not going to beat out Anthony Richardson, and if he does, that means Anthony Richardson is toast in the NFL. I don't think it's going to happen, though. I think they wanted to sign Daniel Jones to give Anthony Richardson a shot to start for them this year. But Jonathan Taylor, if he can continue what he did at the end of the year, he'll be much higher than this. But I just don't think that we're going to see consistency from Jonathan Taylor anymore. I think that he is going to continue to be a player that maybe has a couple injuries in a year, maybe just has more inconsistencies. That's where I'm very comfortable around him, putting him at 13. And Kenneth Walker at 14. I said it earlier in the offseason on my Dynasty channel, Dynasty Fanalysts. I am big on Kenneth Walker in 2025. Now, the reason why is because with Seattle now, they've got Clint Kubiak as offensive coordinator. He started out really hot for the Saints last year, then completely tapered off, not only because the Saints are the Saints, but because they had so many injuries offensively. I think Clint Kubiak is a good offensive coordinator. And what he said about Kenneth Walker earlier this offseason when he first came on to the Seattle Seahawks was very telling. This guy was talking up Kenneth Walker. Like, yes, he's going to be our number one guy at running back. We are going to ask a lot of Kenneth Walker. Well, that screams to me big stuff because it's a contract year for Kenneth Walker. I think he comes in motivated like Breece Hall, like James Cook, and I think if they give him the workload, he's going to freaking dominate. Chuba Hubbard at 15, Amarian Hampton at 16. Chuba Hubbard, like I said, love the guy last year. Everybody knows my story with Chuba Hubbard. If you don't, go back and watch some of those videos from last year. I predicted Chuba Hubbard would be a league-winning type of running back as a mid to late round draft pick. He was exactly that. And Chuba Hubbard got rewarded with a 4-year extension. Now Jonathan Brooks is out. Rico Dowdle is the backup newly signed there to the Carolina Panthers. I don't think that Chuba will have the lightning season that he had last year because I think teams now are going to respect Chuba Hubbard more. But I do think that he will continue to get enough of a workload with an offensive-minded head coach that I trust a lot with Dave Canales. And I think that Chuba will be a top 15 back this year. Don't have as much excitement on him this year since he's not a draft day steal like he was last year. Amarian Hampton to round up this tier at 16. If you don't know him, out of North Carolina, this guy is a stud. If Ashton Jeanty was not in this class and was not so dominant, Amarian Hampton is the clear number one. But since Ashton Jeanty's there, he's number 2. The guy was a beast in college. He's got the size. He's actually got the speed at the size to be really dominant at the next level, and he has the production to back it up. Amari Hansen, I think, is going to be a early day 2 pick. Goes to a team that maybe isn't as good, and I think he's got the skill set. If he goes to a team that's ready for him, he's going to dominate right away. I think Amari Hampton, either way, is a starter in 2024, and I think he has a pretty strong season as a rookie. Dropping down to our next tier, Chase Brown at 17, Joe Mixon at 18. With Chase Brown, it's hard to tell what the Bengals are going to do. They're so cheap, so it's obviously like they're going to sign Jamar Chase. They're not going to do much else. The only way that Chase Brown loses his job is if they draft a running back high. And maybe they do it, maybe they don't. If Chase Brown is the guy, I still think we'll see some inconsistency with him. I think he'll continue to not get a ton of work on the ground. I think he'll be more of a receiving threat where he gets his fantasy points. And there's no problem with that necessarily. I just don't see him ever turning into their Joe Mixon, right? And I don't think that Chase Brown will ever get a ton of rushing touchdowns on the ground. I think that this is just kind of one of those things where we'll have a lot of efficiency, not maybe as many opportunities on the ground as we would like him to have to be a top 12 guy. That's why I've got him at 17. And then Joe Mixon at 18. It's really hard to tell what's going to happen with him because I was obviously out on him last year. I was wrong about that one. Joe Mixon was great last year. But then at the end of the year, he really tapered off at those last 6 to 7 weeks of the season. And he just wasn't nearly as good. He got off to a super hot start. Very Alvin Kamara-esque is what Joe Mixon had. So he is another year older coming into this year. With the Texans, that offensive line is really in shambles right now. They might be either really good or really bad. So I just don't really trust Joe Mixon to have a great season this year. I just don't. Alvin Kamara at 19, James Conner at 20. Alvin Kamara right now is still a New Orleans Saint. And it doesn't appear that they're going to be moving off him. He's their best weapon. Maybe if Chris Olave is healthy, he could be that guy this year. I still think it's Alvin Kamara. So he's going to be fantasy relevant as long as he's with the Saints. As long as they put him out there, he's going to continue to get receptions. He will continue to have not many touchdowns on the ground and probably will be inefficient more and more every year on the ground as well. It's going to come down to reception work, which he's going to get at a minimum. And let's see if he can stay healthy for a full season. If he can, he probably could finish top 15. But based on what we've seen the last several seasons, that seems pretty unlikely. James Conner at 20, I think that is just in a spot where I can't trust him either. He's older now as well. He did just sign an extension with the Arizona Cardinals. But at the same time, he did get injured at the end of the season. And it lost him the last couple games of the season. It's hard to tell. I like James Conner. What he did last year was awesome. I figured he'd have a good season. I drafted him quite a bit on Underdog. But at the same time, this year, it's just, again, it's similar to the Derrick Henry thing where I worry about him, except he's more injured than Derrick Henry is. And I do think that Trey Benson will be more involved as a runner this year. So I think that will hurt James Conner's involvement in this offense a little bit. I've got to have him at 20. Najee Harris at 21 to round this out. I actually really like the fit. To the Chargers, he gets signed on a 1-year, $9.5 million deal. I think this is actually a really strong fit for Najee Harris. Now, he gets behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. That's a check. He should be more efficient this year. The problem is he's not nearly as explosive as J.K. Dobbins was. J.K. Dobbins is out the door now. Gus Edwards is out the door now. So unless they draft someone, they probably will. Najee Harris right now, though, looks like if he's going to be the lead back, I think he's a top 25 guy. And I think that this might even be a little low. I just can't put him much higher than this because I just don't see him being an explosive guy like J.K. Dobbins was. But I love this team fit right here. Dropping down to our next tier. Isaiah Pacheco, 22. David Montgomery, 23. Pacheco is in a spot, it's make or break. Contract year right here with the Chiefs. Injured last year, was not the same guy when he came back. Not even close to the same guy. And he's also older. And he's taken a lot of punishment throughout his years. This is a true fork-in-the-road season for Isaiah Pacheco. He can either completely resurge his value to fantasy teams and to NFL teams in 2025, or he could go the Javonte Williams route where he's never the same guy. I'm hoping for the best for him. I do think that they will make a move at running back this year. I'm safeguarding myself down here at 22 with Pacheco right now. Dave Montgomery at 23. As I said earlier, I think the new offensive coordinator is going to bring in a new philosophy. Maybe he'll try to emulate Ben Johnson's, but I don't think he's going to do it to the same level of success. Dave Montgomery, I think, with the age factor, with the injury factor, becomes more isolated to a Jamal Williams type of role for the Lions, if you remember that a couple years back, to where he was kind of exclusively a goal line carry guy. Now, I think that will be good enough for fantasy success. Dave Montgomery can still have a touchdown season. I just don't think we're going to see as many carries between the 20s as we've seen with him over the years with Ben Johnson. Injuries, no more Ben Johnson. Age, I think they're all going to kind of wipe those out a little bit. That's why I've got Monty at 23. DeAndre Swift at 24 and Ramondre Stevenson at 25. I'll tell you what. Last several seasons, I haven't had any interest in either of these two guys. I kind of do right now. DeAndre Swift might be short-lived. I have a suspect feeling that the Bears could get a running back through the draft. I've heard rumblings of Ashton Genty. I've heard rumblings of Amari and Hampton. It would be interesting to see because I think that either one of those guys would dominate in Ben Johnson's system. But even if that happens, I think DeAndre Swift would be safe. I do. I think he'll be used as a receiving back to perfection in Ben Johnson's role. I think that this would be a really good fit for DeAndre Swift if they don't move on from him, which by all accounts I don't think they're going to do. I like DeAndre Swift right now. I think there's going to be some more efficiency for him this year that he can unlock and through the passing game as well with Ben Johnson's system being a part of that offense now. And Ramondre Stevenson with Mike Vrabel, I think it changes a lot. I think this offensive line, it's already rebuilding through free agency. I think it'll continue to do so through the NFL draft. Now, Ramondre is kind of like a Najee Harris. He's not going to have bursts. He's not going to be very efficient, but he can handle a workload, and Mike Vrabel likes that. So I do think that Ramondre could have a decent season for him in 2025. But he's also older, so I just don't expect too much from a guy like Ramondre Stevenson. But I do think he could have a little bit of a resurgence here for whatever that's worth based on where I've got him ranked. Dropping down to our next tier, Aaron Jones at 26, Tyrone Tracy Jr. at 27. Aaron Jones back with the Vikings here. I mean, it kind of is what it is. This one feels like a little bit of a lazy signing for me. He's just older. He's just often injured. You've got to have him safeguarded down here at 26 because of the injuries. But that being said, clearly was efficient at a lot of points last year, has the capability to give you boom games still, and I don't think that's going away. So I do like Aaron Jones in 2025 in certain games, but in the majority of times, I worry about injury history, and I worry about just him having bust games because he's just not feeling well in those games. And then Tyrone Tracy Jr., 27. The problem is obviously just offense and team. This team stinks. They have too many holes to fill that free agency and the NFL draft can't fix. They're still looking for a quarterback. Maybe it's Aaron Rodgers. He'll take his sweet time. Russell Wilson, maybe it's him. Maybe they draft someone like a Shedeur Sanders. I don't know. But Tyrone Tracy Jr. is good, and I think will be their guy because, again, they have too many holes to fill to worry about a running back at this point. But Tyrone Tracy Jr. just is going to be behind that offensive line that still stinks, with an offense that I just don't trust, with a dysfunctional team. I can't put him much higher than this, even though part of me really wants to because I actually like the player. Brian Robinson Jr. at 28. I think his clock is ticking. I do. If he is, by chance, the running back for the Commanders in 2025, I think he'll be fine. This is a contract year. He could have a good resurgence to play. The problem is we have too many injuries with Brian Robinson Jr. He doesn't handle enough of a workload because they either don't trust him because he's too injury prone or he's just not good enough in their eyes. I do think that he's at great risk of being replaced in 2025. So he's down here at 28 because I do see all those possibilities coming to fruition, and that just doesn't give me any confidence. And then Jerome Ford at 29 and Jaylen Warren at 30 to round out the top 30 in the bottom tier. I don't like either of these guys particularly well. I like Jaylen Warren as a player, but Jerome Ford, I don't particularly love him as a player. It's kind of clear Nick Chubb is done, right? We obviously all understand Nick Chubb is done. I don't think that there's going to be anything there for Jerome Ford. I think Jerome Ford, if he is the number one guy, could have, a top 25 season, but I just don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to draft someone because realistically, their offensive line is not the problem. When they're healthy, they're a good offensive line. They've got a quarterback issue and they've got a running back issue as well, potentially some wide receiver issues, but Jerome Ford, I just don't see him being the full-time starter. So I've got him down here at 29 because if he is, I just don't think it's good enough for a top 20 role. And then Jaylen Warren at 30. No more Najee Harris gets the backfield to himself. I like Jaylen Warren as a Steelers fan. I think he's a really good player. He tries really hard. He's got a lot of effort that he brings on a weekly basis. It's also a contract year. Jaylen Warren should be motivated, and he might have a really efficient season like he has been the last several years. But if they give him more work, I worry about his health, and I worry about the efficiency because he's not a big running back. He's not as great running the ball, like as far as a workhorse type of role, like Najee Harris is. Najee is more capable of a workload that he was capable of, and I don't think Jaylen Warren is that. I think Jaylen Warren will continue to be very efficient on the ground, but I don't think this offense is any good. I have not made that shy. I think this offense sucks. I think they suck on the offensive line. I think they suck in the run game. I think they suck in the pass game. And Jaylen Warren, unfortunately, will be prone to sucking because of that in certain weeks. And I just wanted to make two quick side notes on some other guys that I think could be really good this year. Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne, that dynamic is going to be one to watch throughout the offseason. I think Travis Etienne will get traded at some point, and if that happens, Tank Bigsby will be a top 20 guy for me. I think he has a lot of potential if he is the lead guy. He ran the ball really well last year. He can catch the ball. I think Tank Bigsby is loading for a potential breakout season if Travis Etienne gets traded for his contract season. And then Cowboys fans, I'm sure, are waiting to hear about Javonte Williams. I have no confidence in this. I think it will be very similar to what he did last year with the Broncos. Sorry, Cowboys fans. So let me know where your head's at heading into 2025. And if you want to see my top 30 wide receivers heading into 2025 fantasy football, click on this video right here.